IP is all about protecting those assets.
Right.
In the same way you would build security or install security around your house.
Around your house.
A well thought out, carefully protected portfolio is your best investment. If there are suitable warranties and indemnities in it, then you are at least assured that if somebody knocks on your door, you have a right of redress. Copyright is actually not capable of registration. So everything you create, you write down, it's yours by virtue of the Copyright Act.
Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Legal Standpoint podcast, where we explore the different legal aspects of starting and running a venture in South Africa. If you are a business owner, startup founder, or freelancer trying to navigate contracts, compliance, or intellectual property, welcome, you're in the right place. My name is Kitimetse Pule, the co-founder of Legal Standpoint, and it is my distinct pleasure today to introduce our very first podcast guest. Today we're sitting down with Juanita Stolk, who is a true expert in intellectual property law. She is a partner at Wits Inc. law firm, specializing in trademark, copyright, and commercial IP law. She is also a fellow of the South African Institute of Intellectual Property Law, which means that she knows the ins and outs of protecting your brand, securing your business's creative assets, and also handling IP conflicts. This is a conversation that will save you time and money and some legal troubles. So, hopefully it's worth the watch. Welcome, Juanita.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. Okay, I think for this conversation, firstly, we couldn't have, debuted with a better guest because,
thank you. That's very kind.
You're in a space that I think a lot of entrepreneurs need to know. Intellectual property is something that's so relevant for entrepreneurs because they are innovators by nature, always creating and building things from scratch. So this is a very timely conversation, and I couldn't have, thought of a better topic for our first episode. I think, just before we start, I'd like the point of departure to really be right at the beginning of your journey in the legal space. I'd like to understand what it is that drew you to law and why you decided to study law at Wits University. Is there a specific moment to experience that sparked your interest? And just chat us through that.
Okay, great question.
Yeah.
So, strangely enough, my journey started as seeing myself as an editor. I have a deep love of reading, particularly fiction. And that is where I wanted my journey to go. And I thought that a law degree would be a fantastic foundation.
Right.
Great topics covered, how to interpret different language. English was included as a subject. So I was exposed to different literature from different areas of the world.
Yeah.
Thought that would be a great foundation. So proceeded head on into my law degree. Also, I'm an extremely curious person and I have a thirst for knowledge. I like to know how things work.
Right.
Another little thing about me is that I am a rule follower. I like things.
Sounds like the law.
Yes, that go according to plan. I like it when people follow the rules. I like it when people stick to the rules.
Right.
So that was another part of me that I thought the editing would play into, actually, because language also follows a very sort of set of rules.
Right.
And that's what I thought would be my calling. So started off, with my law degree, enjoyed it, but had this end game that I would be an editor.
Right.
And then hit my fourth year, my final year, and did an elective in intellectual property law.
Yeah.
And thought, hang on a second. I'm also a very creative person. I paint. I'm very colorful.
Yeah.
Was where it was at. This is my rule following and this is my creativity. And this is like watching people come up with these exceptional ideas and these businesses that literally and figuratively change the world.
Right.
And this was an avenue for me to help them protect it and carve out their little niche to make sure that their place is secured.
Right.
So yes, not one particular experience, maybe walking into that first intellectual property lecture, But that's my journey into it.
That's really interesting. And I mean, it makes sense that you have a love for reading because
Yeah.
one thing about the law, like you'll be reading a lot.
A lot of reading, yeah.
No, that checks out. And then, I was going to ask you also what drew you specifically to IP law. And I think you just covered that now.
I did, yeah.
Because I think the law is so multifaceted, right? Like there's sports law, family law, there's so many different avenues that you could have gone down.
Yes.
Is there something else outside of IP law that you think you would have pursued?
Tough question, but no, actually, this was it.
Really?
Yeah, this was it. Like, because of the diversity of intellectual property law and its application across industry, across trade, across continents as well, it was just, it had the largest applicability.
Right.
Everybody has intellectual property. Right. Every business has some kind of intangible asset that they need to protect. So this for me was a way to meet all these dynamic individuals across industry, and I have some pretty interesting conversations with some pretty interesting people, I won't lie. So that to me was like, my passion to assist people and just find my niche as well.
Right. And I think that's so interesting. And I think it's one of the things that we have in common as well. I think when you're just around like founders, business owners, entrepreneurs, there's such an electric energy, you know, an excitement that they have about what they're building. And, they're literally building the future. Yes. And you get to assist with that, in helping them protect their brand and their creative assets. So that also like makes a lot of sense. And then I still want us to, uncover a little bit more about your background. Sure. And the transition from being a law student at WITS, going from WITS University to WITS Law, WITS Inc. Law firm. What was that transition like? Because I can imagine, as a student, a lot of the work that you do is, theory-based and it's in a controlled setting. And then you go into the actual field of work. So can you just chat us through what that transition was like and if there were any challenges that you had during that phase?
Sure. Look, I think a lot of people experience it across the board. The difference between learning the theory behind the task and then walking into a job and being like, okay, now we need to apply this. Like all those years of studying, this client walks into you and it's not a beautifully set out question as would be in your exam paper. It's like, this is everything, figure it out, help me through it. So, big leap. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn quickly where your strengths and weaknesses lie. You learn to think on your feet a lot as well, which I think is great. Like, there's something about being in a position where somebody comes to you like, I need your help. I need you to use your years of skills, your years of knowledge that you've accumulated. You need to help me. And sitting there with somebody's livelihood in your hands, in my case, I understand that it might be different for other people who are dealing with, family law matters or criminal law matters where actual lives might be at stake. This is a livelihood. And it's, I've come up across this issue and you have to help me through this because I can't lose this livelihood. I've worked so hard for this. So that is a big step. It turns a lot from theory into practice. And you're now not dealing with this figurative so-and-so on your exam paper. It's now a human sitting in front of you telling you I've got a real life issue that's got severe consequences.
And that sounds like a lot of pressure as well, right? When you're dealing with people's livelihoods.
But such a privilege. Such a privilege to be able to stand on the front lines and guide people and show them that this is where your weaknesses are. This is where your strengths are. This is a phenomenal idea. Let us help you protect it. So it's such a privilege to be able to see that as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that's like a really, fascinating background. And, kudos to you for like doing IP law because I think, again, it's such an important topic for entrepreneurs. And I think when you're building something from the ground up, you need to make it a priority to secure that. And I'd like us to shift gears now to focus on, just IP and its importance for entrepreneurs and why it's something that they should take seriously and how they can safeguard their ideas. I think when a lot of entrepreneurs think about intellectual property, it seems like, this maze, it seems very complex, very complicated. So can you tell us in a very simplistic way, what the core purpose is of intellectual property and why, as an entrepreneur, it's something that should be, at the forefront when I'm building my business?
Sure. So every business has intellectual property and entrepreneurs need to look at it as assets. You're spending copious amounts of time and energy in creating this business opportunity, and you need to protect it. Otherwise, you have other people, chance takers,
And there's a lot of those.
and there are a lot of them,
Yeah.
sidling right up next to you and taking your ideas and taking your trademarks right out from underneath you because you didn't take the appropriate steps to protect it right in the beginning.
Right.
So we can, like, the easiest way to look at it is, I'll use an example, is your house. Okay, so look at your house as your business.
Yeah.
What do you do to protect your house? You build a wall around it.
Right.
You put security bars in front of the gates.
Right.
Bars on the windows, an alarm, beams around the property, a guard dog, security that patrols the area.
Yeah.
Different layers to protecting your business, your main business, right? That's how intellectual property works. Different things are protected in different ways. And yes, that can feel a little overwhelming, a little bit different, but of course that's where we are.
Yeah.
That's where we're here to help.
Right.
Lots of studying and a couple qualifications behind my name so I can make IP
Right.
easy
You're
for
qualified.
you.
Yeah.
But that's really the point. That's why I'm here. I'm here to make it easy for you.
Right.
But if you don't take the necessary steps to protect it, you leave yourself vulnerable.
Right.
And that is where it is quite sad, because you see these people working like night and day, blood, sweat, tears, sacrifice personal and family time and all that kind of stuff to build this business just to have somebody come along and do something too close or have a confusingly similar or an identical trademark that you can no longer use, or something to that effect, and that really is where it's quite sad. So IP is all about protecting those assets, in the same way you would build security or install security around your house.
Around your house, yeah.
It's exactly the same.
Right. And I don't think I've ever heard that analogy before, and I think it's so perfect, right? Because I think when people are able to, actually picture it, as a house, and as this thing that they would really want to protect and safeguard, it makes a huge shift. A mental shift. And I think creating a sense of urgency to actually, protect those assets that you've created. And, this is a space that you have, domain expertise in. Are you able to share with us some of the biggest misconceptions that you think entrepreneurs or business owners have around IP?
Sure. So biggest misconception I've come across is that most entrepreneurs don't think they have it. Or they don't think they need it.
Right.
Which is so wrong. Everything you do is intellectual property. It is capable of protection. I mean, a straightforward example would be like your company name, your business name, your trademark.
Right.
You're either selling your product underneath it or offering your services underneath it. And you don't protect it.
Right.
Or you pick something that you haven't cleared it, something might be similar to somebody else.
Right.
And they come along and you've poured your blood, sweat and tears, you've got your first round of investment, you're kickstarting, and you get a letter of demand telling you that you may not trade under that name, you may not label your product, you may not. That is devastating.
Right.
So common misconception, no, and another misconception which plays into this is that it's very expensive. It's actually not.
Is it not?
If it's done properly, it's not expensive. The litigation is where it gets expensive. And that usually results because you haven't taken the appropriate steps in the beginning.
Right.
So a well thought out, carefully protected portfolio is your best investment. So I've actually written an article called Trademarks Are Better Than Car Crashes, because that is the truth. So lots of people look at it like insurance. It is kind of insurance.
Right.
It is a bit of a grudge purchase. You don't really want to spend the money. You'd rather put it into, skills development or, marketing or something like that. And then somebody knocks on your door to tell you to stop using it.
Right.
And then you really wish you'd taken out the insurance before you had the car wreck, right? So same analogy, same thing. This is so much more important though, because it is your entire name. It is your entire business.
Right.
The software you develop. If you don't take assignment of the underlying copyright and the source code, somebody else could use it.
Right. Oh my gosh. And I think that's so relevant for a lot of entrepreneurs, because you're right. I think when people think about IP, they think about, some groundbreaking, never before seen novel idea. And it's no, just even your name, even the business name is, worth protecting. And
so
I
that's
think,
where patents steal the floor, because
Right.
that's one of the requirements, obviously, to patent something. So yes, and
Yeah.
I think the misconception there is that, oh, it's only patents.
Right.
It's so much more than just patents.
Yeah. I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because I think, like, people really need to see that it goes beyond patents, and
Definitely.
it's everything that you said in the beginning, like everything is intellectual property.
Yes.
And I think
everything's an asset.
right, and it's clear right now in this conversation, and this is a recurring theme that we see at Legal Standpoint as well, where people think like reactively, to legal affairs, and
Yes.
it's not something that's top of mind when they're building their businesses, because as you mentioned, they'd rather focus on customer acquisition
Yes.
or like brand visibility, marketing. It's like, actually, you need to make sure that your legal affairs are in order, because if that's not in order, then everything else is compromised,
Well, just think about one practical example. You come up with a trademark, your company name, whatever the case may be is.
Yeah.
You brand everything: pens, pencils, water bottles, lanyards, takeout billboards, etc., etc. You get this letter of demand telling you that you're infringing somebody else's trademark, and you need to stop. You need to destroy everything.
Right.
All that money
Right.
that you have spent thinking that intellectual property protection is not the most important.
Right.
Visibility, marketing,
Yeah.
much more important, is now going to cost you money.
Right.
Because you have to destroy everything, or
Right.
at the very least withdraw it from wherever it could be.
Right.
Take down all those billboards, recall all those pens, change your website, change the app. If it's physical products you're selling, recall them, rebrand them.
Right.
Such an issue.
Right.
Such an issue. And all of it could have been circumnavigated if you'd
Right.
run it past a specialist IP attorney. This is what I'm thinking. What do you think? Will you run a registrability search? Is it available? Am I going to be infringing anything, or can I run with it?
Right. Sure. I think that's really valuable advice as well. And then I was just curious also, just around the different cases that you've worked on, because you worked on quite a lot in the space. Is there a case in your mind that stands out where someone like lost their livelihood because they didn't have adequate IP protections in place? Either like someone that you directly worked with in Wits Inc. law firm, or just generally like a story that you've seen where you were like, oh my gosh, like this person lost a lot, and it was a truly heartbreaking story.
Look, we've seen a lot of instances of that. Obviously, because of client privilege, I can't discuss
yeah.
my clients directly. But you do see it, in news reports and that kind of stuff, where people just are on the back foot, whether it's through ignorance or because they just decided to do it anyway. Unfortunately, it happens. It does happen. And even like it's not just an exclusively South African issue. It is a worldwide issue. Some of the big corporates have deeper pockets, unfortunately. So the little guys get a bit squashed.
Right.
And it does happen. It is heartbreaking. I can't recall one specific instance off the top of my head, but it does happen. It definitely does happen.
Yeah. Okay, we'll have to Google for that, if you want to see people that have lost their livelihoods. And then, I'm also just curious about how, we normally talk about IP protection as a defensive mechanism, so someone doesn't come in and like pull the rug from underneath you. But are there instances that you can point to, or just advice that you can share just around how you can use IP for the opposite, where you use it as a lever for growth and as a competitive advantage instead of, just as a defensive mechanism?
Definitely. I mean, there are two sides of the same coin. So protecting your intellectual property carves out your niche in the marketplace.
Right.
So it forms your bubble. It stops people from coming too close. So it's as offensive as it is defensive.
Right.
Because you're carving out your niche. This is my spot. You may not come close. My rights are clearly defined. If you come too close, you're going to get a letter of demand telling you to stop.
Right.
Same thing as the defensive. A registered trademark right is an absolute defense to infringement. So if somebody says to you, oh, you're infringing my copyright, my trademark, you need to stop, you can be like, this is my registered trademark right.
Right.
No. And then we go from there.
Right.
So obviously, if it's not protected properly, that's where you find yourself in litigation. That's usually where it is. But if you take the steps in the beginning, carve out your niche, you carve out your bubble.
Right. And then I think let's shift gears now and just focus on, shifting market trends. We know that AI is, the buzzword, but it's more than a buzzword now, because I think people are starting to see, the consequences of using AI and also not using AI in your business. But there's a lot of shifting trends just around, how AI influences ownership and just ideas of authorship. So I'd really like us to focus on those trends now. Before we do, I'm curious to know, is there like an addition or a change that you'd make to current South African IP law to better support entrepreneurs and business owners?
Look, it's not for me to really criticize the legislation that's currently in place. I do know that there's the draft copyright amendment bill that is coming into play at some point. It is still being passed backwards and forwards for discussion and for changing. It's quite controversial in some of its, in some of the clauses that are contained in there. And obviously we can't really discuss it because it's not law yet.
Right.
It's still very much under construction, let's call it construction. But yeah, there are some clauses there that I am a little bit concerned, favor a big corporate over an entrepreneur.
The smaller players.
Yes. So that would be cause for concern for me. That being said, though, there are a lot of industry forerunners that are weighing in on those provisions. And that is why it's constantly being referred backwards and forwards for the amendment, because it's not in favor of all the smaller players. So that would be one thing that, I would be a little bit more concerned about.
Right. Yeah, that is a big concern and something that I think if you are an entrepreneur, is it accessible for entrepreneurs now to read it?
Yeah. Yes, it is. And honestly, read it. There are opportunities to send in opinions and thoughts. Do that.
Yeah.
I mean, we live in a constitution. We need, we have the right to be heard, and we should use that opportunity to do so.
Right. And I think that's such an important point as well. Just like around democracy and the constitution, as you just mentioned, that everyone just needs to be more proactive, and reading the different laws that we have, even if you just said like it's not a law yet, but just like being more proactive and understanding what's happening in the space and the policy making space, especially if it's matters that pertain to you and like how you operate your business, So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
And then, back to the conversation around AI. So, in a world where algorithms and AI are increasingly shaping creative output, is the traditional concept of ownership changing? And, is it becoming obsolete now? If so, like what replaces it?
So not obsolete. I don't think so at all. I mean, the right to ownership is constitutionally entrenched. So that's not something that will just fade into non-existence.
Yeah.
I think with the onset of AI and the algorithms like you've described, it becomes a bit more murky. And I think there might need to be a few amendments to some legislation. I mean, in particular, the Copyright Act was drafted in the 1970s.
Right.
I mean, I don't even think it made provision for cell phone technology, to be totally honest.
Yeah.
So we would potentially need to look at that, some amendments to deal with the ever-changing technology.
Right.
But no, I don't think that ownership and authorship is obsolete, not at all. But it would need to, the conversation would need to change around those elements. The onset of AI has been a fantastic tool that people have made use of. But because of this question of authorship and ownership, that's where the cautionary tale comes into existence, because it does have implications on how you use it, on how you protect it, on how you take ownership of something that might have been created using AI or by somebody using AI as well. So that would be my cautionary tale to the entrepreneurs making use of it. Just be mindful. Exercise your discretion. Just read the terms and conditions of the platforms that you're using. They are explicit about ownership and what you can and can't do with content, images, anything that's been generated using an AI tool. So that would be my word of caution here.
Okay, and I think that's like really important as well, because AI is advancing at such a rapid pace now.
Yes.
And you can generate music, you can generate artwork. There's so many, even legal documents, right? Like you can generate so many things using AI now. And I think, again, back to, taking a proactive stance, like people really need to, be proactive in reading the terms and conditions of the platforms that they're using. Because I was going to ask, like, if I just created a song now, using ChatGPT, like, does it belong to me? But I'd have to go to ChatGPT and look at the terms and conditions,
You would.
right?
You would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And since AI also is affecting, how we dispense legal services to people, are you able to speak through what Wits Law Inc. firm is, how it's adopting technology in its practice? Legal tech generally, the market is, increasing, it's growing at a rapid pace as well. And the market is, expected to grow even more in the next few years. So how are you using that in your practice now, either to dispense legal services or, just internally, to run the company?
Sure. So, I mean, AI is, like I said, a great tool, but needs to be used with discernment.
Right.
So it's in addition to and not in place of. So as much as everybody thought that AI was going to take jobs away from lawyers, it's just not, unfortunately.
Yeah.
One of the big risks there is that AI scrapes data from all over the world. It's not specifically generated for South Africa.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So you log on to GPT, ask it a question, I don't know, draft me a service level agreement. And it might incorporate a clause dealing with the law of tort, which is only applicable in the States.
Right.
And you as an individual without any, okay, not you specifically, but maybe one of the entrepreneurs without any legal background would be none the wiser.
Right.
So yes, it is definitely a tool that can be used, but needs to just be used with caution, obviously. So that being said, insofar as it assists in efficiencies and helping processes move faster, one example that jumps to mind is the trademarks office. My business partner Marius could speak more to this, but 20 years ago they were doing everything in paper form, and physically having to courier it to Pretoria.
Oh my goodness,
Now, with all this beautiful technology that we find ourselves in, they've updated their online platform where most of those paper-backed processes have been digitized, which obviously it helps turn the wheels so much faster. So things happen quicker. We're able to make direct contact with the examiners if we need to on the examination, that kind of stuff. We can lodge trademark applications, renew them. Instead of write a form, put it in an envelope, send it off to the trademarks office, all that stuff is now digitized. So we can see that, technology in the law space is not necessarily a hindrance. In fact, it can be a help.
100%.
Moves it a lot faster. The other side of things, and it's a relatively new onset, is Court Online and Case Lines. They're the two new platforms that we use when we go to court to fight matters.
Yeah.
That's also a huge step. We can issue papers, get case numbers, all that kind of stuff, all online. Same thing with serving and filing papers. Instead of having to go and stand at a queue or drive to your opponent's offices to physically serve documents, by agreement, you can agree to serve electronically, which is also so much more efficient than how practice was. So my tale is just of caution and not of, no, don't use it. It's terrifying. It's so new, whatever. Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
I think that it definitely has its place. I think AI is still a little new, maybe. I think we're going to see it develop and grow and go forward. I think for right now, we're still figuring out, where, what, how does it fit. It will find its place, though, I have no doubt.
And I'm just curious also, like in the context of South Africa and, IP laws that are in place, because AI is advancing at such a rapid pace and like the legislation and the regulation of AI is being outpaced by the AI development itself. Do you think we're well equipped to deal with, the shift, especially now with people using AI and like, creative output? Is South Africa ready for that, or are we?
I think so.
You think so?
I do think so.
Yeah.
While the legislation might take some time to tweak and to amend, I think that, we're movers and shakers in this country. So I think that people will thrive and move to make sure that it forms an integral part and, they can use it, they can leverage it, they can move forward. I mean, we're industry trailblazers here. So I don't think that the fact that the Copyright Act is written in the 1970s is going to slow anybody down. I think that if anything, there will be, a drive to work through whatever issues may arise.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And I can see like you have a lot of love for this country. So
I do.
I love that. Okay, awesome. And then I think we can shift gears again and now focus on a segment specifically to advise, freelancers, entrepreneurs, startup owners on, actionable insights that they can take from this conversation. And the first one that comes to mind is just around how designers sometimes, like when you're an entrepreneur working with a designer to design your logo or, other creative assets, how they might use open source like assets in doing the work. How, as an entrepreneur, if you're not aware of that, can you protect yourself?
So in that instance, I would advise that you make sure that your contract with your designer has suitable provisions in that cover you. At least then you have a right of redress, which obviously would largely depend on the financial standing of the other side.
Right.
But if there are suitable warranties and indemnities in it, then you are at least assured that if somebody knocks on your door, you have a right of redress against the person that designed it originally for you.
Right.
But honestly, I would ask.
Right. Just ask.
Did you use a stock image?
And if they lie, because people lie all the time.
They do, unfortunately they do. But then that's where the contract comes in.
Right.
You've got yourself an option at the very least.
Right. Okay. And then just the question also around what you said earlier with how people have this misconception that IP protection is really expensive, and you were like, it's actually not. If I'm an entrepreneur starting out and, I don't have like a big budget for the legals, what are some of the like early stage steps that I can take just to protect my IP? Is there something that I can do without going to a lawyer or, breaking the bank? Like, what can I do?
Look, so I'll share with you, copyright is actually not capable of registration. It's automatic.
Right.
Free. So everything you create, you write down, it's yours.
Right.
By virtue of the Copyright Act. So already, just in the process of sitting at your desk, drafting a policy, starting on some software, drafting some source code, it's yours.
Right.
It belongs to you.
Right.
So already, the awareness that belongs to you already, and making a list of who did what or when you did what, and making sure that it's well within your knowledge.
Right.
You're already 10 steps ahead of everybody else. The trademark is your next biggest asset, and that you are capable of doing it on your own. I wouldn't suggest it. It is quite nuanced. I would suggest that you look at booking a consultation with me or asking me to conduct a registrability search to see whether there's anything out there. If that is really something that is untenable and you can't do, at the very least, try and conduct what we call a bit of a common law search, which honestly amounts to a Google search to see if there's somebody out there using something similar, also in relation to similar goods or services. Remember, that is a nuanced thing. It's the reason. So it's something called the NIS classification. I don't want to get too technical and bore the listeners, but it divvies up all products and services. It's the reason we can have Cobra taps, Cobra cars, and Cobra floor polish, and nobody's infringing anybody else because they all do very different things, right? Okay. So you do need to just make sure that that mark is being used in relation to something similar to you. So that's your first port of call. If going to see a specialist IP attorney is just something that you can't do right now, that is where I'd start. Just check what else is out there.
Right.
And even though trademarks are territorial, they're specific to, the jurisdictions in which you file them. Don't be fooled into thinking that, okay, it's a US company, it's not applicable here.
Right.
There are different laws that dictate different things. Don't want to get into all the technical stuff because it's like 7 years worth of degrees and stuff that I could keep you entertained with. But that is definitely where I'd start. And then you can file an application yourself at CIPC. I said, it's nuanced. It does require some insight. It does require a discussion with a specialist. So I would recommend that you come and discuss it with me. I'll happily guide you, tell you what my thoughts are. But yes, knowing that those are two of your biggest assets, not the only assets, but the biggest ones, copyright being free and automatically vesting in yours. And then trademarks, which are your business name and how you run your business, most important, definitely need to be protected.
Okay, so you heard that, guys. It's free for the copyright. So that's one thing off the list, right? But I think
caveat, as long as it's in a material form, but yes.
As long as it's in a material form, you heard it here. But I think like what you're saying really just speaks to being proactive and like knowing what's happening in your business, you know, documenting everything you spoke about, like the importance of just being organized, knowing when certain things were done and by whom. And, you know, just like doing your due diligence and, you know, doing a Google search if you can't afford a lawyer. And I think that's, you know, an important thing to bring up, because I think at least from the conversations that I've had with founders, they always talk about how in the early days when you don't have like a massive budget, you know, this is something that then goes down the list of priorities a little bit, even when it is important and they can recognize the importance of it, but it's, you know, it's a little bit challenging. Okay, awesome. And then are there any like other practical insights that top of your mind, like you think entrepreneurs or like business owners or freelancers should know when it comes to protecting the brand, protecting the company's assets?
Look, the biggest thing is protect it, because once you've got it protected, nobody can take it away from you. It's really that simple. The next thing, especially for the freelance side of things, independent contractors, make sure your agreements are very clear about who owns what is expected, because one of the nuanced things with copyright is that it may only be, and this is per the Act, it can only be transferred by way of written agreement. So that common misconception of I paid for it so I own it, barring a few exceptions, that's not the case. It is counterintuitive. People would assume I paid for it, it's mine, because that's how normal retail trade, you know, works. It's just not that way with the Copyright Act. So I would just be abundantly clear about who owns what circumstances you can use or monopolize, or so that is one of the things with the stock images. Their terms and conditions are very explicit about what you can and can't do with one of their images. Some of them might give you a license to use it, but are specific in saying you may not monopolize as a trademark. In which case, not only are you breaching that contract, but you can't monopolize your own trademark. So just be abundantly clear. If you are going to use platforms, make sure you understand what the circumstances around that are as well. And yeah, I think that's about the takeaway. Just protect it, because then you've got it and it's yours, and then nobody can stop you.
So just because you paid for it doesn't automatically mean that it's yours. Just putting it out there again for people to really understand that. But yeah, I think that's, you know, probably the biggest takeaway from this conversation. You know, that you should, you know, just protect it. Just protect your brand, protect your intellectual assets, your intellectual property. And it's something that should be a priority as an entrepreneur, because, you know, like we mentioned several times in this conversation, you'd hate to build something from the ground up just to lose it, you know, because you don't have those protections in place. And there's so many different avenues now, you know, to do that. And Juanita is like one of them, you know, so if you need help with, you know, trademarks and, you know, just other IP protections, like please chat to her. And I think, you know, just from this conversation as well, we can see that you're someone that's very personable and, you know, you haven't used a lot of jargon. And I think that's another thing that entrepreneurs need to, you know, they need more of that, you know, just people explaining all these complex legal terms in simple everyday language, and not making that like an extra barrier for them. One thing that we spoke about earlier was just around how, you know, people think of IP defensively, right? Just as a way of protecting themselves. But I'm curious to know how business owners and entrepreneurs can use IP to create alternative revenue streams.
So in this instance, like we discussed, IP is an asset. So any asset can be leveraged. So in this instance, if you've protected it and you find yourself on the other side of a due diligence where somebody is looking to purchase your fabulous company for hopefully millions and billions, or you're looking to raise your first round of investors because you know you're ready to take over the world and you need some funds to do that. The protection of your IP is one of the first questions that you're asked. Do you own it? Have you protected it? What steps have you taken? Where does it reside? And it does become a bit of a red flag issue if you haven't taken those steps.
Right.
So say, for instance, you've commissioned, a designer to make your logo for you, and you never took written assignment of it. So now you have a license to use, but you don't own it. So that's a problem.
Right.
And in those instances, it's not always quick to resolve.
Right.
The trademark registration process can take anything between 2 to 3 years. So
Sure.
it is a long process. I mean, we encourage our clients to carry on using. That doesn't mean you can't use until it's registered, not at all.
Right.
But it takes a while, so you should start that process early.
Right.
So if you find yourself in a due diligence, it's not something you can just sort out quickly. Okay, I'll quickly apply for a trademark registration.
Right.
It's not. And also, that's actually one thing as well. Company name registrations and trademark registrations, not the same thing. Just because you have the company name registration does not mean you have the trademark.
Right.
Technically, they should be checked against each other. They aren't.
Right.
So it is a problem. Okay.
Wow.
So that, don't be confused. They're not the same thing.
Right.
But protecting the IP adds significant value to your business. So somebody is prepared to pay much more when it comes to, look at them, they've got their ducks in a row, they own the trademark, it's registered, all the underlying copyright has been assigned to them, they know all their know-how, it's been put down in a procedure, all their policies have been put down in paper and all that kind of stuff. Certainly makes it look great. So that's one aspect where you will benefit. The other aspect is through licensing. You create this phenomenal software that will change the world. It automates anything, everything.
Yeah.
You can license that to other people.
Right.
You've got it in copyright. It's been put down. It's automatically vested in you. Okay, we can start licensing it for use.
Right.
Or the alternative is, okay, I've started this phenomenal range of beauty salons and now I'm going to franchise.
Right.
And I'm going to take over the world with that. And if you don't have that protected, you can't license it for use to other people when you're not even aware of what's yours or you don't own it.
Right.
It's very difficult to license things that, a reputation in a trademark. It's very difficult to encapsulate what that means. Whereas if you've got a trademark registration, this is what I'm licensing to you to use under these certain circumstances, and this is how it's going to work. So yes, it is a defensive mechanism. You want to carve out your niche, but also it's empire building stuff. This is, okay, how do we take on the world? This is how you take on the world.
Right.
You make sure you're protected. You make sure you've got it in your back pocket.
Yeah.
And then you go out there and you take over the world.
Right. I love that. And I think entrepreneurs will also resonate with that because when you're building something, I think you have, the biggest ambitions for it, that you will be able to franchise it, that you'll be able to license and make money from it. So your IP doesn't have to just be something, to protect yourself, and it doesn't have to be a defensive mechanism.
It is literally a tool to take over the world.
Right. I love that. I love that shift in perspective.
Yes.
I think that's really great.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you so much for your time. This has been a really insightful conversation.
It's been great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I think there's a lot of meaningful and actionable, more than anything, takeaways that entrepreneurs and freelancers can get from this conversation. So thank you again.
Perfect. Amazing. Thank you for having me.
So that has been the very first episode of the Legal Standpoint podcast. We hope that you took away really practical and valuable insights from this conversation. And we hope that you'll join us again for the next episode with our next guest. I won't reveal who now, but you'll have to tune back in to find out. Please don't forget to like this episode and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.